Scroll disclaimer. This story is based on true events, but has been dramatized for emotional depth and narrative flow. Certain names, locations, and specific details have been changed to protect the privacy of individuals. Any resemblance to actual persons or situations is coincidental unless explicitly stated. I couldn't remember the last time I'd woken up without feeling like I'd already run a marathon in my sleep. My body was tense, my head heavy, my thoughts an endless loop of deadlines, meetings, and unanswered messages. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks," Clara said the moment she stepped into my apartment that Thursday afternoon. She was my oldest friend, and she never sugarcoated anything. "I haven't," I admitted, slumping into the couch. "Work's insane and, well, everything else isn't much better." She sat across from me, narrowing her eyes. "Sophia, you need a break. Something to reset your mind and body. You should go for a massage. There's this place downtown, Peaceful Touch. Trust me, they're amazing." At first, I laughed. I wasn't the kind of person who spent money on massages or spa days. But that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I found myself Googling the name. The reviews were almost too good to be true. Words like transformative, life-changing, and more than just relaxation kept popping up. Against my better judgment, I booked an appointment for Saturday. When the day arrived, the city was wrapped in a light drizzle. I walked through slick streets until I spotted the place, a small, inviting doorway framed by hanging plants and soft yellow lights. Inside, the air was warm and scented with lavender. Gentle music floated in the background, like a lullaby for the soul. A woman at the reception desk greeted me with a kind smile. "Sophia? Welcome. Your therapist will be ready for you shortly. Please have a seat." I settled into a plush chair, sipping the herbal tea she offered, letting my shoulders drop just a little. A few minutes later, a tall man with calm, steady eyes approached. "Hi, I'm Daniel," he said, his voice low and unhurried. "I'll be your therapist today. Is there any particular area you'd like me to focus on?" "My shoulders and lower back," I replied, suddenly aware of how tense I sounded. Daniel nodded. "Got it. Come with me." The massage room was softly lit, the scent of essential oils stronger here, sweet, earthy, comforting. He handed me a towel and stepped out while I got ready. When he returned, the session began with slow, deliberate movements. Each press of his hands seemed to drain away the tension locked in my muscles. My mind began to quiet, my breathing deepened. And yet, something felt different. His hands would linger just a second longer than expected. His voice, when he checked if the pressure was okay, carried an almost personal warmth. I told myself it was just my imagination, just his professional style. But deep down, something about the atmosphere had shifted, subtle, but impossible to ignore. And I had no idea that this small, almost unnoticeable shift was about to change everything. I'd had massages before, birthday gift certificates, a spa day with Clara years ago, but this was different. It wasn't just Daniel's technique, it was the way he seemed, present. Completely, unwaveringly focused on me, as though the rest of the world had fallen away the moment I lay down on that table. The slow, deliberate kneading of my shoulders made me sigh involuntarily. I felt the stiffness melting, not just from my muscles, but from somewhere deeper. "Long week?" he asked after a few minutes, his voice so low I almost thought I imagined it. "Long month," I replied, a little laugh escaping before I could stop it. He chuckled softly. "I can tell. The tension in your back, it's like you've been carrying the weight of the world." I wasn't sure if it was his tone or the warm scent of sandalwood in the air, but my guard started to slip. Words tumbled out about work stress, my sleepless nights, the lingering ache in my chest from a breakup I thought I'd moved on from. "I'm sorry," I said, suddenly embarrassed. "You didn't sign up to be my therapist." "Sometimes," Daniel said, pausing for just a moment before pressing into the base of my neck, "relaxation isn't just physical. Letting someone listen can be part of the healing." Something about those words sank into me. The way he said letting someone felt personal, almost intimate. His hands moved lower to my mid-back, firm but careful. My mind, which had been spinning for weeks, now felt quiet, except for one thought I couldn't shake. Why did this feel so different? Maybe it was his attentiveness. Maybe it was the way the room seemed warmer, the dim light wrapping around us like a blanket. Or maybe it was something I wasn't ready to name yet. "You're doing really well," he murmured, as though I were performing some task rather than lying motionless on a table. "Just breathe and let go." I did. For the first time in what felt like forever, I actually let go. My breath slowed, my body sank deeper into the table. His hands seemed to find every hidden knot, every stubborn spot I didn't even know was there. But in the quiet, I became aware of something else. His movements were just slightly slower now, his fingertips brushing in a way that didn't feel purely mechanical. A strange comfort settled over me, almost like I was safe here. And yet, somewhere inside, a whisper of curiosity stirred, wondering just how far this unfamiliar warmth could go. I didn't know it then, but this was the moment when the line between professional and personal began to blur. And once blurred, it's nearly impossible to make it sharp again. The quiet hum of the music wrapped around me like a soft blanket. It was the kind of instrumental melody you forget you're hearing until you notice how much calmer you feel because of it. The lavender and sandalwood scent in the air was warm and steady, like a heartbeat. Daniel's hands had moved to my lower back, firm yet careful, and I could feel the tension unraveling, thread by thread. "How long have you been in the city?" he asked after a moment. "Almost 4 years," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "Moved here for work." "I thought it'd be different." He made a thoughtful sound. "Different how?" I hesitated. It was a question I could have answered in 100 ways, lonelier, harder, less magical than I imagined, but the truth felt too heavy. "I guess I thought I'd feel more at home by now." He didn't respond right away, but the rhythm of his hands didn't falter. "Sometimes," he said finally, "home isn't a place. It's a person, or a feeling." The words hung in the air longer than they should have. My mind lingered on them even as he shifted to my shoulders again. His touch felt different now, still professional, but there was something extra in it. I wasn't sure if it was care, empathy, or something unspoken entirely. I opened my eyes for a brief second, glancing at the soft glow from the salt lamp in the corner. The room felt smaller than before, like the air between us had thickened. I caught myself wondering what his expression looked like right now. Was he focused? Was there a flicker of something else in his eyes? When his fingertips brushed just above my collarbone, my breath caught slightly, not because it was inappropriate, but because of the tenderness in the gesture. It was fleeting, over before I could think too much about it. "Are you comfortable?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper now. "Yes," I said quickly. Maybe too quickly. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. The logical part of my brain insisted this was just an unusually attentive massage therapist. But another part, a quieter, more dangerous part, was wondering if I was the only one feeling this subtle shift. Minutes passed, but I could no longer tell if they were moving quickly or slowly. I felt cocooned, suspended in a moment that felt just slightly outside of normal time. When he moved to my arms, his hands lingered, tracing the muscles with a precision that felt almost like memorizing them. And I realized something unsettling. I wasn't just relaxed. I was curious. And curiosity has a way of opening doors you can never close again. The clock on the wall ticked softly, but I wasn't sure if time was moving faster or slower. Each press of Daniel's hands seemed to pull me further from reality and deeper into something else. He'd moved to my neck now, his thumbs making small, deliberate circles. I let out a long breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. "You're holding so much tension here," he murmured. "Like you're bracing for something." His words landed heavier than I expected. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was fine, just tired. But instead, I found myself whispering, "Maybe I am." There was a brief pause, like he was considering his next words carefully. "You don't have to, not right now." The sentence was simple, but it felt like an invitation. An invitation to what exactly? I wasn't sure. His hands slowed, not in hesitation but in focus, like he was mapping every inch of my muscles. The heat from his palms seeped into my skin, and the world outside that small, dimly lit room faded completely. I realized I was listening for his breathing. It was steady, unhurried, but close enough that I could feel it in the air. The space between us felt charged, though nothing had crossed the line yet. It was still a massage, still professional in its movements. But there was an undercurrent, a silent acknowledgement that we were both aware of something else threading between us. When he shifted to work on my forearms, his fingers brushed lightly against mine. It was the kind of touch that could have been accidental, should have been accidental, but it lingered just half a second longer than necessary. A spark ran up my arm, sharp enough to make me inhale. "Too much pressure?" he asked, his voice low, almost knowing. "No," I said quickly, and I wasn't talking about the massage. Our conversation thinned after that, replaced by the quiet rhythm of his movements and the soft music. Every so often, I felt the ghost of his touch in places it hadn't yet gone, like my body was anticipating it before it happened. And somewhere between one breath and the next, I realized I was no longer thinking about stress, work, or the outside world. I was thinking only about the man whose hands were on me and what it would feel like if they wandered just a little further. I closed my eyes tighter, trying to anchor myself. But deep inside, a part of me was already stepping across that invisible line. And I wasn't sure I wanted to step back. The quiet in the room felt different now. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was a silence that carried weight, like a held breath waiting to be released. Daniel's hands moved to my shoulders again, but this time his pace was unhurried to the point of deliberate. Every press, every small shift in his grip felt purposeful, almost as though he were speaking without words. I tried to focus on the rhythm of my breathing, but I was acutely aware of the warmth radiating from him. Even without seeing his face, I could feel his attention fixed entirely on me. He worked his way slowly down my spine, his fingertips tracing over tense muscles in a way that felt almost familiar. Not because we had met before, but because the sensation was strangely intimate, as though he already knew my body's language. At one point, he paused, his hands resting gently at the small of my back. I opened my eyes, why, I'm not sure, and caught him glancing at me in the reflection of the small mirror on the wall. Our eyes met for just a second before he looked away, but that second was enough. We both knew. He didn't say a word, and neither did I. But in that silence, a message passed between us that was clearer than anything spoken aloud. His hands resumed their movement, now along my arms, the pads of his thumbs brushing the inside of my wrists. It was a touch so delicate it made my pulse skip. I wondered if he could feel it. "You're starting to relax," he said quietly. His tone wasn't just observational, it carried something warmer, almost approving. "I guess I trust you," I murmured before I could stop myself. There was a slight pause, then, "That means more than you think." The words landed deep, in a place that had nothing to do with muscles or massage techniques. From that moment, the room seemed to shrink further. Every movement felt closer, every brush of his fingertips heavier with meaning. I realized I was leaning into his touch, not out of necessity, but out of want. The professional line between us hadn't technically been broken, but it was hanging by a thread. An unspoken understanding now tied us together, and the strange part was, I didn't feel the urge to untie it. In the back of my mind, a warning whispered about consequences, about things that can't be undone. But the louder voice, the one I was listening to, told me something else entirely. Stay here. Stay in this moment. Because whatever this was, it felt like the beginning of something I might never experience again. The playlist in the background was coming to an end, a slow piano melody fading into silence before the next track began. It should have been a cue that my session was almost over. But neither of us seemed in a hurry. Daniel's hands moved more slowly now, as if each motion was deliberate, meant to stretch the moment longer. When he pressed gently along my shoulders, his thumbs resting near the base of my neck, he didn't move away right away. The weight of his palms stayed there, steady and warm, grounding me. I could hear his breathing, slow, even, and the faint sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Then it happened. As he worked along my upper arm, his fingertips brushed the inside of my forearm, not in a professional sweep, but in a gentle drag that felt unmistakably personal. My breath hitched. The pause between that movement and his next told me he had noticed. Neither of us pulled away. His hands continued, now softer, slower, lingering at points that had no reason to be lingered on except maybe one. There was no rush in him, no sign that he was trying to finish the job. It felt instead like he was memorizing the shape of me through touch. At one point, he leaned closer, not enough to be intrusive, but enough that I could feel the warmth of his presence near my shoulder. "You've been carrying a lot," he said quietly, almost like a secret. "Yes," I whispered, my voice catching slightly. "You don't have to, not right now." The words repeated from earlier in the session, but this time they carried a heavier weight. A promise. A warning. Maybe both. His hands slid down to my wrists again, holding them lightly for a moment before releasing them. That hold, brief, delicate, was enough to seal the truth we had both been avoiding. This was no longer just about easing muscle tension. When his touch finally left my skin, the air between us felt charged, as though every molecule remembered what had just happened. I lay there in silence, unsure if I wanted to break it. Daniel stepped back, his voice calm but softer than before. "Take your time getting up. No rush." I nodded, though he couldn't see me with my face turned to the side. I stayed still for a long moment, my thoughts tangled between disbelief and an undeniable thrill. Whatever had happened here, it was subtle, quiet, unspoken, but it was real. And it had changed something inside me. I knew I wouldn't walk out of that room the same person who walked in. I stayed lying there for longer than I should have, the scent of sandalwood and lavender still heavy in the air. My skin felt warm where his hands had been, as if his touch lingered long after he'd stepped away. When I finally sat up, the dim light of the room seemed softer, almost dreamlike. I wrapped the towel around myself, moving slowly, not because I was sore, but because I didn't want the moment to end. I dressed quietly, each movement deliberate, my mind a replay reel of everything that had just happened, the pauses, the lingering touches, the way he'd held my wrists for that brief, unexplainable moment. When I opened the door, Daniel was standing just outside, leaning casually against the wall. He straightened when he saw me, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Feel better?" he asked, his voice as calm as it had been the whole time, but I swore there was a trace of something else in it. I nodded, my own voice quieter than I intended. "Yes, better than I've felt in a long time." There was a pause between us, long enough for the sounds of the front desk and the faint music from another room to filter in. "I'm glad," he said, his eyes meeting mine for a moment longer than necessary. "You carry yourself differently now. Lighter." It felt like he was speaking about more than just my posture. I handed him the folded towel, my fingers brushing his briefly. It was nothing, really, barely a second of contact, but it sent a tiny spark up my arm again. He didn't move away quickly, and neither did I. "Thank you," I said finally, though I wasn't entirely sure what I was thanking him for. The massage? The conversation? The way he'd made me feel seen? "You're welcome," he replied, his tone deep and steady. "Anytime." That single word, anytime, hung in my mind as I walked toward the front desk. Clara's voice echoed faintly in my head, reminding me that this had started as a simple way to relax, nothing more. And yet, what I felt now was far from simple. I paid for the session, the receptionist smiling politely as she booked me for next time. I didn't remember asking for another appointment, but somehow it had been made. The moment I stepped outside, the drizzle hit my face, cool and real against the warmth still lingering in me. The city was the same as it had been an hour ago, but I wasn't. Something had shifted. And I couldn't tell if it was just curiosity, or if it was something I was already craving again. The rain had picked up slightly by the time I stepped outside, the soft drizzle turning into a gentle curtain of water. I pulled my coat tighter around me, but the warmth inside my chest refused to fade. Every step home felt slower than it should have been, as though I was trying to stretch the space between leaving the wellness center and returning to my normal life. Because normal suddenly felt less appealing. My thoughts kept drifting back to the weight of Daniel's hands, the sound of his voice, the way his words seemed to find the parts of me I didn't even know needed attention. It wasn't just physical relief I had walked away with, it was something else, something I couldn't quite name. When I reached my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sank onto the couch. My phone buzzed with work emails, but I didn't open them. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, letting my mind wander back to that dimly lit room, the scent of sandalwood, the way time had seemed to slow until there was nothing but the space between us. Over the next few days, I caught myself thinking about him more often than I should. In the middle of meetings, while making coffee, even in the quiet moments before sleep, when the world outside went silent. I remembered his words, "Home isn't a place, it's a person or a feeling." I wondered if he knew the effect he'd had on me, if he'd felt it too. By Thursday, the itch to go back had settled deep under my skin. I opened the Wellness Center's website just to look at the booking page. My fingers hovered over the available time slots. It would be easy to pretend it was just for another massage. Easy to tell myself I only wanted the physical relief again. But I knew better. What I wanted was that strange, undeniable connection, the way he'd made me feel like the only person in the world for an hour. I didn't book right away. Instead, I closed the laptop and sat with the decision. But even as I did, I knew the choice was already made. Because what happened that afternoon wasn't something I could neatly fold away into memory. It was the start of a story I didn't see coming, and I had the feeling it wasn't over yet. Some experiences change you quietly, almost without your permission. And sometimes, they begin with something as simple as a massage. But what happened in that small room with Daniel had been anything but simple. It had been unexpected, intense, and, if I was honest with myself, unbelievable. And I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen the next time our paths crossed? 5.